Good evening, Satakunta. Thank you for the invitation to play, for creating a safe space for performance and for failure. Like we heard today, art has a lot to do with things that I associate with play myself, because play is the art of stuff, mess, and wonder. We heard that art is something profoundly human. We could easily say that so is play. And what I'm doing here tonight, this is my day or evening job, being a light bearer of play. I'm interested in how play moves us, how it moves us cognitively, emotionally, in bodily ways. And art is something about experimentation, we also heard, just like play. Let me take you on a journey through my explorations of this subject, because play has moved me in a lot of ways and continues to do so. My title for tonight is Artistic Thinking and Game Development as a Form of Artistic Practice. Wow, that is a lot to say. But I have many examples of my work being a researcher, an artist, something in between, looking at these both worlds, combining them in different ways. Let us surface from the depths of the previous presentation, which took us to these philosophical thoughts that I greatly admire, but won't be doing in my presentation tonight, because let's face it, we are in Pori, not a shitty thing at all, a huono. But I've written of my hometown as the game city of the West Coast, and I wrote in a local newspaper why this town should be thinking about a little bit about the expertise that Pori people in themselves have about games and play. They are the experts of playfulness. And in order to attract people's playfulness, an atmosphere that accepts playfulness is needed. In Pori, which has been recognized as a city of games, it is therefore worth investigating in strengthening the emotional intelligence and empathy-based competence closely related to play. This is the main ideas I'm going to address tonight, because I'm interested in what kind of futures we are creating today and how we can be more human in those futures. And this, I believe greatly, can be achieved through play. Because we've seen that sound can be fickle, sound can surprise us, sound can be serendipitous and give us strange reactions. I thought of beginning with a little sound snippet of sorts. It comes from my pocket, actually. Do I see people recognizing the sound of this object I'm pressing now in my pocket? I think so. Because it comes from this game, which is the beginning of my own journey in the world of games. On the right hand side, you can see my father, Markku. He was 11 years old, playing the Kimball game, actually called Trouble, at the moment when it landed in Finland. They were test playing, but this picture is from the first cover of that game. I'm a big fan of blue color, and it occurred to me in a moment of time that he's actually holding a blue pawn in his hands. This must be why I always need to play with the blue pawns myself as well. So this marks the beginning of the journey that I've taken with games, and this is my grandfather who started originally the startup company in his garage. I have worked in the same garage myself, but from this story you sense that I am a true material girl, because I will talk about materials, the physicality of games, the spatiality of immersing in various kinds of games. Materials mean a lot to me. I have lived in a factory. To give you a little bit of more perspective on what kind of play experiences a researcher of this kind has touched upon in the past are the examples you can see here. And I consider art being quite a significant part of how I have approached these playthings and play experiences. What is the relationship between toys and games to play then? Well, here you can see a visual mapping of how I see them to connect to each other. In this city, we have tirelessly heard about gamification. We could also be talking about toyification, but I think we can combine this by speaking about playification, and this has to do with, for instance, urban space where we are located now at the moment. And for that reason, it has a lot of connection points to art. How do toys and games and various playthings connect on a theoretical perspective? Well, I've observed in my work that play in general has become a very game-like outside of games, I mean. What has impact on this is, of course, social media. But perhaps most interestingly to me, we can perceive toys and dolls as avatars for today's players. That is also a connection point between toys and games and the way we play with them. Finally, back to the games. I've done research with many colleagues who are primarily game researchers in Finland. And what I want you to look at in this visualization is the conceptualization of the play experience, which is very suitable to be used when we talk and analyze games as well. I started with physical, fictional, functional, and affective, but I've added some dimensions to this list as my research has evolved. So what I like to add to the dimensions of design and play of physical, functional, fictional, and affective, which to me means empathy with the objects, through the objects, is that play is social and socially meaningful, and it can be temporal. And I coined this term of ludo-unity while I did research on pandemic play, and that means playing for the common good. And this point I want to stress to you today. And some examples as we are approaching the end of the presentation. Before doing so, I wanted to bring with me my master's thesis from the University of Art and Design Helsinki, as it was called back in the days. And this was published, or I got the master's in 2007. And the title really is The Art of Making a Game. And that made me smile because I had not come up with the original title for tonight's talk. But this goes so well with the ideas that we have been hearing about this night, about art, about games, about play. Wolfgang Kramer, who I cite in my work, has said that whoever plays a game does it from his freedom of choice. Playing games is not work, not commitment, nothing you have to do. Therefore, we can say that playing games means being free. This is a lovely quote, and I've addressed freedom to play in my visual art, dealing especially with the themes of toys and war. And we are sadly in a situation where these themes are still lingering around heavily. I have made games, artified experiences, as I live in the factory, as I walk through it. My eyes are open, I glance at all kinds of parts that could be turned into artified experiences, but they have their origin in games. I'm also interested in the intersections of urban art, interaction design, mobile games, and toyified arts. And with my colleague Pirita Ihamäki, I've created secrets here in Pori. But I've done other kinds of installations. This was in the beginning of the pandemic, where the 1st of May couldn't be celebrated as usual. So I asked the people at UC Pori, could I please fasten my 99 balloons in the windows to cheer people up? This is very low threshold play activism in a way, but it's still something. It's a gesture of inviting people to play. So I think we should always remember that the play experiences are multi-dimensional. And let's not forget about Ludo Unity, playing for the common good when we design any kind of playable experiences. Finally, I just love boxes. I love to open them, I love to close them, and this is an invitation to you all. If you come to think about anything we could do together in terms of cubes, I'm all ears. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
What if we would have a game where there is no shooting but only defending, just like in human interaction? Alt Zone, a mobile game and a work of art. The human mind is like a stone castle, encircled by protective walls. These walls are built to shield the castle's king, the ego, from emotional forces arising in interaction. Yet the walls alone are insufficient to protect this fragile ego. Additional lines of defense are needed. When defenders lose their strength within the field of interaction, the walls are left exposed, allowing emotional forces to reach them without resistance, wearing the stone down until it crumbles. It's time to choose your defense. Anorexia, depression, sleepiness, joking, nitpicking, self-harm, legalism, projection, intellectualizing, overeating. In Ego Clash, two teams of opposing lines of defense protect their stone walls from an emotional force projectile that bounces between them. Each team is controlled by two players who must interact and coordinate to hold the defense. Behind the stone wall lies the interiors of the Soul Castle, the shared space of identity, inhabited by multiple players. Here, furniture is not merely decoration, but classifications through which a shared identity is constructed and rearranged each season. Chat is a designed interaction system. The player selects an emotion for each message, making effect visible in speech. In clan chat, you represent yourself. In language chat, your clan. In global chat, your country. As interaction scales outward, identity becomes increasingly collective. ALT Zone asks whether a community can raise its members when responsibility is shared by all. In ALT Zone, the clan operates democratically through open voting. Decisions are made in public view, revealing how power and opinion form through mutual visibility. Certain roles allow members to act without a formal vote. Yet this authority is delegated by the clan and remains grounded in its democratic structure. The clan acts together. Some play on the field of interaction, some trade, some carry out raids, and others shape the soul castle. Everyone has their role. A victory or defeat does not belong to a single player. It raises or lowers the clan's total score. The clan's money, rewards, and property are shared. In ALT Zone, success is not an individual achievement. It is a collective outcome. ALT Zone is a mobile game and a work of art. If its artistic mission succeeds, players may come to understand themselves and others more deeply. We protect ourselves from emotions, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes too much. ALT Zone does not preach a new society. It builds a small one and lets players inhabit it. We need one another to succeed. Victory, loss, and ownership are shared within a transparent democracy. With love.
everyone. It is a pleasure being here, and thank you, IGDA Satakunta, for having me at Creative Crossroads this year. My name is Natasha Skult, and I will be telling you more about how to build a memorable IP through art direction. Now, since this is 10-15 minutes long talk, and I teach this, and also this is literally something that I breathe and live as a topic, I will really try to go straight to the point. So let's just simply dive into. So first of all, why games? And how do we approach that in games, since games are interactive mediums? So they are completely different in a way of more traditional ways of artistic production, which is like artist produces something, gives out to the world reacts to it, positive, negative, doesn't matter. It can be also just personal tastes and so on. So a lot of different things affect the whole appreciation or acceptance or whatever it is, like basically criticism. But in games are breaking that bridge of monologue that artists usually have. So in games we have a dialogue where, and again for the sake of simplicity here, I will call just saying game designer, but it's a whole game dev team. It's basically a dialogue between a game designer and a player, in a way that designer is basically arranging things around in a way that they would like player to experience certain things, but player will do their own stuff in their own way, no matter how much we guide them or we want them to do it certain way. So it is a dialogue there, and the player is also creating not just own experience as such, but it's also very important part, which is really giving us designers and art directors really big responsibility, is that through a gameplay we are creating very meaningful memories, and these memories stay with us as literally something that we have lived. So if I ask you, for example, here's Mario, like, how did your Mario go? Let's say you were playing. So nobody is ever going to ask, oh, my Mario was jumping around, kicking turtles and saving princess. You would most likely say, oh, I did this and that. I achieved, I collected this, I saved the princess. So it's very emotionally connecting and engaging, but also it's not enough in a mechanic, and it's not enough to have cool graphics. It has to really click. It really has to be on emotional level of why players should care. Because when you think about this, we are not at all necessarily even competing, when you think of a market within the other games. We are competing with this free time. Like, is someone gonna doom scroll or play our game? So basically, it's a completely different way of approaching also. Why should someone really sit down and play your game and not do anything else, basically, in their free time? So to address that, especially this is more game design related, but it is, again, that's where the art direction is rooted, because you can't direct how something should be looking without the game design of what it should represent. So basically art direction follows the game design. So that's why I have to address this in the very beginning. And I want to remind everyone that because of what I've just said, it is the player. Everything happens in the player's head, no matter what we give them, fancy schmancy stuff, or even simplified things, very indie-driven kind of like experience on the screen. But their personal memories are being created, and our job is to give them these building blocks in creating these memories. So now, how do we treat art direction when it comes to different projects? Obviously, different genres, different platforms will require different kind of adjustments, so there are lots of moving parts regarding it. But I like to use with my students usually this example. So pretty much the visual storytelling, us, especially as humanity, as how we evolve, and we are constantly still evolving. Like, the evolution is not just stopping somewhere. We are still, like, now our brain is completely mushed with TikTok and whatnot. So how much we can actually concentrate and so on is really different, and communicating to people nowadays is way different than even 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, and so forth. So the point here is that it has to, of course, be very connected to the what you are building. What is it that you need to say? What is the world? What is basically the world that you're building in its own, like from the big picture into the details? And for all of that, there's nothing really new. We are still using the same building blocks for visual storytelling as the great masters, or as even the cavemen, when you think about it. So basically, shape language and color theory are your best friend there. And on top of that, like even better friend, like the best bestest friend would be light. Because even with the same setting that you have, the whatever it is, even in the game engine or whatever, just changing the lighting, playing around with the light settings will completely change the story, the atmosphere, and so forth. So light, especially coming from a goth, it's a really, really important and heavy emphasis on light as an artist and art direction. So basically, shapes and colors are your tools, how you would be approaching pretty much any project, and I will give some examples very soon. Now, when we talk about the business, obviously, it goes into, it's very common, and also the kind of like being this recognizable, that everyone knows what you're doing, like what project you're, like which game is actually even belonging to which maybe studio, because some studios have very particular way of expression and so forth. So it becomes branding, obviously. And the brand now, when we think about branding, I would like you to at least take this into your own aspect as, could your game be recognizable even if there is no logo of it or any name kind of written down? Can it be recognizable? So think about Mario, think about World of Warcraft, think about all big Zelda, like all big franchises, Lara Croft and so forth. Like every single one have their very distinct visual direction that represents who, like literally what that franchise is, like an IP, which again is all about shapes and colors, which again we see that in branding and marketing, like all that. That's literally how it works. Now, I will give you an example, because again, very limited time. I'll give you an example of our latest product, Willow Guard, which we are now launching in few months DLC. So here is just a little teaser of the DLC. But basically, in the game, you play as a badger witcher. That's as simple as it can go of what the game is about. And game has a very particular illustrative, so it has two modes, narrative and dungeon mode. In the narrative mode, it's very distinct, illustrative, kind of like comic kind of art style, illustrative approach, while in the dungeons is pixel art. So basically a bit of nostalgia of, kind of JRPGs and old school dungeon crawlers and so on, but again, it in its own very specific way, and again, what this game needed as its own product. But then as we were developing, and we are still developing obviously this IP in various ways, cross-platform and cross-media, so we also did, together with Feeling Good Films, a graphic novel. So here you have, for example, a graphic novel representing the characters from the game. And then on the very right, you have comic strips, our weekly, very simple, kind of like funny little strips that we post every week. Now, when we were deciding, besides, like, I'm not going to show you our art Bible and so on that we have, especially for licensing and so forth, because we are having a lot of merch and a lot of new stuff that we are working on. There is board game coming. There is another graphic novel. We are also negotiating animated TV series, but lots of stuff in the making. But in a nutshell, just to give you kind of how to even approach. So here is what we did. Ta-da! As simple as it goes. So basically, Gveros, as our main protagonist, as the Willow Guard that you play in the game, this is basically the shape that he represents. So basically, it doesn't matter now. Now, if we go back, doesn't matter, is he in the game? Is he also pixel or whichever version? Is he in graphic novel? And here as well in the comics, the simple shape plus the colors, his specific colors, and very specific features of beard and having a braid. Actually, he has a braid in the back, and 2 swords and so on. So basically, these recognizable things are something that, and scars are something that, but as a shape, that even in the smallest, well, if we would make a mobile game, he would be still recognized different from any other character, even if everything would be black and white. So other willow guards that are here, you see that he is more of a rhomboid. So this is also something that we have in different. Then there is bog witch or swamp witch Gnosmi. She's more of this sort of like triangle-y character. And again, I'm not going to go into this whole meanings of the shapes and so forth, because I'm sure you already know. And Ray, our little scholar, she's very rounded, so that is also something that represents that. And then we have merchant, for example. So these are just examples. We have for every single character very specific shape language, which again can be adopted now into whichever other medium, because we want to, now if I go slightly back, we want that every medium that we create new products with, that they correlate also in the expanding the world of Willowguard that we are building into something memorable. And it doesn't matter now if someone gamer or not. Maybe they will like something else from the other things. Like we also even made a really, really wonderful and thick coloring book, for example, for adults. And to show you that even she's Badger as well as Veros, Ajati, our smith, she has a slightly different so there's kind of like more like adjustments to here. So sure, she's also a Badger, but she has her own also shape language to be very distinct from Veros, even though they both have also braids and whatnot. So with this very simple, very quick like showcasing, I just want you to think more of the overall world we're building, of the literally characteristics of every single character and who they are and what makes them, again, pretty much the same as these logos. Sorry, just literally, just like this, that wherever they would be, no matter where on the screen and so on, you always know who is who, and again, doesn't matter which even media we are representing them in. And as a takeaway, it is really important to listen to the audience, to listen to also your product, because again, your product is its own living being. And also the direction can adjust, but it's mostly the pillars, arranging the pillars, the visual pillars, just like game design pillars, to be something that would guide you, and also making sure that you don't go into some really weird directions. And always approach it like, okay, if we remove the logo, if we remove anything that would say this is Willowguard, will that be recognizable? Again, as an example. And the whole point of this is that our direction is not just, oh, pretty pictures. It's the whole strategy. So please treat it as a strategy. Don't just do something because it's, or someone does this style and now we need to do it because it's trendy. That's a different story. Please do be like, listen to your product, listen to your story of that product. And when it comes to creating this on the long term, because again, it's not just something that you do as a one-time thing, it becomes a service, it becomes its own living being. And that's why continuity, regardless now of the medium you end up doing in any kind of transmedia strategy you might have, please focus on that sort of like continuity in which that is what creates this memory, that one remembers it from whichever other. Think about Disney. Like, they are the masters of creating very memorable stories, characters, everything. Because once there is an emotion, the emotions are the ones that create that attachment to the brand that you're creating. And I mentioned for a second trends, even social media trends and whatever. Listen, trends fade. Especially in this current state of social media and the whole AI lunacy that's happening and whatnot. please focus on the world building, value your story, value your product, and it has to be reflecting to the human that should be interacting with your product. So when you think about, I said that Willowguard is Badger Witcher. So when you think about Witcher, what represents Geralt? What is Geralt as an icon? He represents a lover and a father, as a city, like father like father figure. In our case, well, Gueros is not a lover. He's neurotic. That's what he is. So he's neurotic badger. And now in DLC, he's also becoming a father. Nothing to do with Geralt. It's something that he's actually getting a cub to be apprentice and so forth. So there is that correlation as well. So something that one can relate as a person outside of just, cool graphics, cool effects, whatever else there might be. So please, no matter what you do, treat this as a strategy, not just as one-time thing or, again, prettiness. It has to have function for a much bigger emotional engagement of the audience, no matter where your audience is. Again, even culturally or regionally and so forth. And with that said, thank you once again for having me. Remember that you are not alone. Now that you're here at IGDS Satakunta, also generally there are so many different organizations in the regions, like different regions. Now in Turku we have Turku Game Hub. Of course, jamming is a big part of community of like-minded people and sharing knowledge and so forth. And of course, we love games, which I warmly welcome you as well to join as being part of us who love to play and make games. And with that said, don't be a stranger. I'm more than happy to get in touch, connect, and discuss more with which like way more time. As said, there is plenty more. This is just barely scratching the surface. So thank you for having me and have amazing rest of the evening. Bye.
I'm going to start off by going down through definitions of what I see as art and what I see as the purpose of art. And first of all, what I see the meaning of art is the purpose of art is to be able to create or discover or convey meaning, and at doing that, create symbols, and in that sense, that then what is art? And going back to symbols, I think art is in itself a language, in the sense that it's something fundamentally and profoundly human. And when you think of language as a structured system of symbols, is something that gives birth to abstract thought, something that gives birth to human consciousness. It's sort of the software that is driving our meaty hardware, and art then is a language that gives birth or comes from the subconscious. It's something more ephemeral, something more liminal, something that well, pun intended, can't be nailed down to a science. And how then do I see it that in the context of this, that we're talking about gaming and game development? Where does artistic thinking come into it? And what is it? What is it really in practice? And again, it comes to the I think it boils down to that aspect of creating meaning, and how. Because now there's this trend of artists often reduced to seen as something that creating let's say entertainment, in the same way that games used to be seen as a purely a form of entertainment, but now obviously they've evolved to an art form in its own right. And how that has been possible is obviously there's been artistic thinking behind it, because not every game is an art piece. So what is it that makes a really great game? What elevates a game into a form of an art? And that, again, it all boils down to the human experience of how. I mean, immersion is a big word. Immersion is always a big thing about how we see as what is a good game. And that has a gazillion elements that come together to bring that about. But then those experiences that become meaningful, that become powerful, that become long-lasting. There are games that I still play like 20, 30 years later, and they still manage to have an impact on me. And there are storylines that have personally had an impact on me, have personally evolved me emotionally. I've become emotionally invested in things taking place in the game, in the characters, in the world, and they've actually had a psychological impact on me. And that all comes down to dealing with sort of like the human element present. It's not. It doesn't. There are a million different nuances that you have to navigate to have a meaningful impact. I mean, of course, you need a functioning game mechanic, but you don't need AAA graphics to have an impact. I mean, the whole retro gaming thing and everything that comes with it, it's how those things impact us. What sort of how they manage to engage us and our imagination, and that is a realm of artistic thinking. Is sort of like navigating and being cognizant of the human element of the experience. It's and that is as we have like more of AI slop flooding in, and even though the technology brings opportunities, but what remains as a currency is authenticity, is that engagement, and that is something that is sort of elusive and abstract. You can have there are plenty of examples of hundreds of millions being poured into gaming products that have absolutely no impact on people, yet you have small indie games that can have a profound impact on people and a huge investment from them personally and emotionally, And that comes down to small elements that make the games meaningful to the people. And that is all about, and that I would make the claim that is what artistic thinking is about. Being aware and cognizant about things that create meaning for us, things that we can relate to. And those are things that are kind of navigate, because you can't put it on a workflow chart. You can't say that, okay, well, this is our project plan. We go from point A, point B. We have these things that we'll have this sort of build. We'll have these things. But how do the people become invested? How does it speak to them? How does it, and I'm not just talking about like cheap manipulation or jump scares. Those tire quickly. But what is the purpose of art is creating meaning and finding ways to realize that. That is the nature of artistic thinking. Putting it down to practice, how do you actually do that is a difficult task, because there's no roadmap for it. It's something that is by nature very intuitive, and I would say artistic thinking in that sense is being sort of cognizant of how you're being impacted, how you're feeling it, how the different elements mesh, and how to utilize those and navigate those. That is something that takes time, that takes experimentation. You need to invest yourself in the sense that you understand, like, why does something impact me? And it's a useful toolkit in the sense because shared human experience is just that. It's shared. It's universal. There's a good guarantee that you find this impactful. Other people will find it impactful if it is honest and authentic. So, what is artistic thinking? I would say it's giving space and time for reflection. It's about being truthful, and it's also about courage of finding ways to bring your personal investment into it and making it visible so people can relate to it. It's sort of a difficult subject to talk about in the sense of how abstract it is. It's you can't say to somebody, well, just be intuitive about things. But it's easy to lose yourself in the purpose of finishing a task, of creating something concrete. But you need to find that sort of awareness of where that personal experience lies. And finding the tools to bring that out. And like I said, it's about creating meaning. It's about the small choices and bringing your personal ideas into it. I mean, when we look at a thing like how is that cool? Why does that resonate? Why is that interesting? Trying to way to engage that and understanding what it is about. It's so sort of like let's call it a sort of like a creative practice of self-aware introspection. It becomes an impossible word jumble now, but take risks and be sincere and put yourself into it, and more than just the grind. There's actually I'll end with a Chuck Close quote. He was an American visual artist who made these massive portraits of people. And he said, inspiration is something that needs to find you working. As you work, find space to take a pause and think why you're working and what it is that you're working towards. And why you're doing what you're doing, and how does what you're doing relate to that? And at that point, I think you'll discover venues to artistic thinking. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ansa Alt, and I'm here to present our pilot project, Extra Territory. Since last fall, I have been writing and designing this idea for a game that has now turned into this project on including artists and artistic vision to the earliest parts of game design. We wanted to see how this would affect and push forward the design and early concept of the game.
One of the challenges in game development is how easily realism begins to limit thinking. If a game is set on another planet, why should it still repeat familiar logic? In this project, I am particularly interested in the scale of the human figure within an unfamiliar environment, a character who does not belong to that world. That disproportion is my artistic starting point. For me, art is not about direct explanation, but about merging different observations and perspectives into one.
When the world is unfamiliar to the player, I believe the soundscape must also carry that sense of unfamiliarity. When the game world is set beyond Earth, I am interested in creating new sounds and timbres that do not yet exist. I do not mean merely unusual effects, but a sonic language that does not directly refer to any familiar instrument or cultural framework.
I am especially drawn to 3D because it combines many elements: drawing, constructing space, choosing light, and framing. In 3D, you can literally place a world and decide what the player sees. Ideas often begin with a simple question. When I think about time shifts or time loops, I choose one idea and start developing it further. I do not know everything at the beginning. For me, it is more important to ask how something works, what it causes, and how far it extends. Is it a small spatial phenomenon, or does it affect the logic of the entire world?
Games create a particular tension. The player controls the character, yet the character has their own narrative arc. In a time loop structure, there can be situations where the player knows more than the character, or vice versa. That creates tension, but it requires careful balance so the character doesn't feel inconsistent with the player's actions. Through role analysis, the character is no longer just a technical entity, but an agent with a past, a position, a profession, and goals. It forces me to ask, what does this character know? What do they believe? What do they fear? How do these aspects appear in movement, rhythm, and in their spatial relationship to the environment?
Where the camera is placed, what the player sees, and how the controls feel have a huge impact on what playing the game feels like. Even a small change in perspective or movement can transform the entire experience. For me, artistic thinking means not asking first how something works, but what it means. Only after that do we consider how it can be implemented technically. There is no neutral code. Every technical choice shapes how the player experiences the world.
I never experience music as neutral. It establishes a perspective and guides the player's state of mind.
At the same time, the character does not exist in isolation. They take shape in relation to the world, the game mechanics, and the genre. This project has taught me that 3D is not just about modeling. It's a way of making a character's thinking visible, when technical and artistic work move forward together.
Developing my own expression is based on recognizing effective examples and building on them.
In collaboration, I value honesty. It is important that someone dares to say if an idea does not work or if the direction is wrong. Not everything needs to be justified at length, because over-explaining can disrupt the process. In artistic work, speaking impulses out loud is valuable, and you should not fear others' reactions. The role of an artist in a game project is to offer alternatives.
Exposing an unfinished idea for many people to see is uncomfortable, and I would have preferred to write more before opening it up like this. I don't regret it, however. It's been really beneficial for me and the concept. Working like this, you have to step out of your comfort zone, but it is worth it for creativity and it moves the idea forward. It also requires flexibility. You can't go completely according to your own preferences, and you have to be able to take other people's ideas into account, even when it's your story.
An idea should not be locked too early. It needs time to remain unfinished and in motion. When I draw, the thought is not fully formed in advance. The line thinks at the same time as the hand moves. The real work happens in that unfinished state, in a quiet space where I listen and observe before I know where I am going. This is also why artificial intelligence interests me only to the extent that it creates space for thinking. It can remove repetition, but it cannot replace the moment in which an idea takes shape through making. My sense of being an artist pulses in silence. This project has reinforced for me that freedom does not arise from boundlessness, nor from rigid constraints, but from a bounded playground.
The artistic side is more difficult for me because the why often only becomes clear through doing. Uncertainty is part of the process. That's why I've learned to value clear core questions at the beginning of a project, and the importance of discussing direction together early on.
Through this project, I have also learned to trust myself more. I joined without a formal background in game programming and quickly realized that I can learn and do much more than I thought. Because of all these, I've begun to see how programming directly shapes how a game feels, what it communicates, and how the world opens up to the player.
The rush schedule of this trial has been hard on our artists, and towards the end of our deadline, they've had increasing difficulties forcing creativity. I haven't been immune to this either, and my writing pace has stalled. In the gaming industry, professionals have long talked about the issues of such crunch periods. And while this has been just a light version of it for our last few weeks, we're absolutely feeling the effect. I wish to leave this talk with the advice to everyone that when you have an idea, write it down, even if just for fun. Sometimes, when you play around with it, it starts to grow and become something you can present to others, and maybe even something you get to work with in the future. Or to make it your own palace of imagination. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Esa-Paulo Pelkonen. I'm a philosopher of education, a PhD researcher of educational sciences, and a co-founder and learning designer of Psychtrail Gaming. Today I will be talking about the art of gaming, building upon the idea of meaningful dwelling in games. So what do I mean by dwelling? Well, to dwell is to linger in time. To be alive in relation to space and time, to a certain chronotope, as Bakhtin would say. Now, the history of mankind in this sense is too long to recite here, but shortly we could say that the realization of time gradually revealed the power of sacrifice, transforming sustained attention to evolution of thought and work, further accelerated and synchronized by industrial processes. Now, for some time already we have inhabited this digital condition, where the relationship with time has evolved beyond its limits, resulting in fragmentation, where competition and interruption of our attention is constant. This has generated unhealthy ways to dwell within the digital environment, such as doom scrolling through the negative feed of social media and other addictive behaviors where contemplation becomes rare. Swipe, scroll, next. And this kind of media might be called feed media. Feed media invites us to move to encounter something new. Its value lies in the next item, in the never-ending stream where progress becomes quantitative movement, measured by how quickly we arrive at the new experience. But not all digital media structures attention this way. In contrast, there is what we might call deep media that invites us to stay and perceive, where value lies in engagement, sustained through invested attention, where progress becomes qualitative movement toward dwelling, toward understanding. Feed rewards novelty and deep rewards attention. Well, where do games stand on this feed-deep axis? They don't really want to be swiped, they demand participation, they invite active decision making, and you cannot progress without agency, without engagement. And yet, games too can collapse in the logics of feed media, right? When design privileges reward over perception, progress becomes repetition, engagement becomes compulsion. So, the designer holds significant power in shaping whether a game becomes a medium of fast feeding or deep meaning. But as with any medium, we must not forget the responsibility of the experiencer as well, and their capacity to engage meaningfully. Both bring power to the encounter, and together they create something in between. A space of agency where the game truly happens. This in-between space of emergence is what we might call interaction. Not interaction between two fixed entities, but a relational process, something that becomes through its unfolding in time. Today my aim is to explore how the player participates in co-constituting this dwelling, and how this process might be understood as the art of gaming. So, a game does not truly exist until it's played, right? They require agency to unfold. Painting hands, film runs, but game waits as a system of potential emerging in the co-creation between the player and the system. How does this co-creation become art? To answer this question, we turn to the concept of dwelling, the philosophical construct of being in relationship with the environment, upon which I built my understanding of the artistic experience of gaming. By dwelling, I do not mean passive inhabitation, but an active space of becoming, a way of relating to the world through shifting modes of agency. To dwell is to be anchored, yet open to the traversing flux of time, reshaping both the space and our way of being within it. Drawing from traditions in art philosophy, I propose these 4 interrelated modes of dwelling: immersion, configuration, reflection, and reconfiguration. These form a kind of tidal movement of approach and distance, of arrival and return, where each cycle deepens the relationship. Immersion is the first mode of agency, the becoming with the world. It is this unhurried attunement where you begin to sense the rhythm, the flow of the system, the stage of lingering exploration, of synchronizing with the game's potential, where meanings are localized and situated. This is the home of lived experience. It's about feeling the world. Second mode is configuration. Here you step slightly back to perceive the world more analytically. You begin to recognize patterns, how mechanics relate to narrative, how the world holds together. And this is not detachment, but a kind of configurative understanding of the world. The third mode of agency is reflection, seeing yourself in relation to the world. This is the kind of turning point where the question shifts from what kind of world am I inhabiting to what is my relationship to this world. In reflection, the mapped system becomes a mirror, and you begin to develop your own taste. This is where awareness develops into self-awareness. The fourth mode is reconfiguration, where the insightful reflection begins to shape you. A shift in perspective, a practice of active becoming. Here, experience is no longer something you merely had, but something you engage with to reorganize how you perceive the world, how you read systems, how you inhabit them, how you affect them and are affected by them. Reconfiguration doesn't require a dramatic change. It may be also a subtle reorientation to become with the world from a bit different perspective than before. From the standpoint of artistic experience, it is essential to dwell through all these modes, because feeling without interpretation collapses into an inward cycle of addictive confluence. And distance without reflection becomes conformative knowledge without understanding. And reflection without transformation remains self-awareness without actual change. And change, not resolving into feeling, hardens into idea detached from lived experience. Now I would like to synthesize the idea of meaningful dwelling with games by elaborating this cyclic model. So first, as stated, you gotta lose yourself in the game by attuning to its rhythm, to feel it. Immersion depends on design, player profile and skill level, but it always requires operational literacy to move within the system through situated meaning making. From here, attention may begin to flow toward the game's mechanical or narrative structures, depending on the player. After some time of immersive play, a curious player takes a slight distance and looks behind the curtain. Not to exit the game, but to perceive how it holds together while remaining within it. And when coherence of the design holds the interest, patterns of meaning start to emerge, such as how mechanics relate to representation or how actions encode values. Once the map of meaning has been configured, a new question arises. What does this mean to me? Here the gamer has reached a reflective distance where one begins to wonder, how am I playing and why? What does this say about me? Do I value this and why? This is where taste, evaluation and subjectivity emerge. where play extends into value beyond the domain of games. Design can orient toward this through productive frictions, such as challenging mechanics, ethical tension, and narrative devices. But reflection alone is not enough. We need reconfiguration, which requires plasticity from the game system and our minds as well. Otherwise, we risk becoming prisoners of our own thought loops, within and beyond the game. Reconfiguration reshapes perception, enabling new ways to explore and become with the game. The cycle of dwelling is now fulfilled when insight is integrated into practice, and we re-enter the world transformed. This requires layered playability and recursive depth from the designed system. And so we return to the start of the cycle, to feel, but with a bit deeper relationship with the world that we inhabit. Artistic experience with games is not passive lingering, but this kind of recursive practice of engagement, where immersion, configuration, reflection, and reconfiguration creates a cycle of deep meaning. And when this cycle holds, I think that the game ceases to be a dopamine loop and becomes a loop of meaning instead, capable of flowing beyond the game itself. Therefore, I would like to invite you to rethink how we speak about gaming and game design, designing not only mechanics but affective choreographies, not only systems but maps of encoded values, and not only challenges but frictions that invite reflections, not only outcomes but plasticity that allows transformation, and not only replayability but recursive depth enabling the meaningful integration of change. We often ask whether games are art, but perhaps the more precise question is, how do games become art? Today I have suggested that this does not occur by declaration, but by expanding the quality of engagement between the designer and player. Dwelling is a constructive stance, shifting us from reactive performance toward attuned immersion, systemic perception, reflective wonder, and reorientation through action. Within this dynamic process of agency, gaming transposes into a qualitative movement of becoming with the world. And that, to me, is the heart of any artistic experience. Thanks a lot, that's it for me. Here you can see my contact information. Please do take contact if you have any questions or follow-up questions of this presentation or anything else. On the right hand side you see this visual artist Gabriel who has designed all these amazing graphics used in this presentation. Be well.
going to start with a question. How many of you have had an idea that you never acted on? Raise a hand. More, yes, thank you. Probably wasn't because it was bad, right? It was probably a good idea, but the main reason I would bet was because you weren't sure or you weren't ready for it. Raise a hand if that was the case. Sometimes it can be really a bad idea, and that's okay. But most of the time, it's because you weren't ready or you felt unsure about that. Maybe in some cases, when it comes to job applications, you thought that somebody else was more qualified to do it. Maybe if there was a promotion happening, you thought somebody else should get it because they're more qualified to do it. There is a small space between idea and an action where most of these opportunities just disappear. They never come to life. There is a Finnish company called Futurist that I personally really like. They have a slogan that has stayed with me for many years. Love the problem, not the solution. My name is Violeta Ivanova. I'm the chairman of Pori Entrepreneurship Society, and we have built a whole community that loves to take action in solving problems. And problems are many, and especially nowadays. We have entered this future work stage in life, and also today there were plenty of very well scripted presentations. I am not one to script them. I have a couple of notes, but we're just gonna go with the flow today, since it's a few minutes left anyway. But we are entering this kind of future of work situation where everything looks very different from the type of future that we were prepared for in study, or the type of future that our parents were used to doing. When it comes to careers, they're more flexible, and I promise this will make sense. They're more flexible, they're more project-based, there's different kind of roles that are being combined, there's different industries that are blending, and different skills that are required. Companies are not the same either. There isn't anymore this idea that you would study something, enter the workforce, and work on that same job and same task, perhaps maybe climb the ladder a little bit, and then happily retire when it's your time. That is no longer the case. It's ever evolving. Teams are smaller, problems are more complex, and the change is constant. In this kind of environment, stability, which most people are seeking, is really hard to find. That is why many people in the working life are actually struggling nowadays. And it all has to do with your ability to adapt. How well are you at adapting? How well are you at reframing? How good are you at creating value? This is where artists come into place, and all kinds of tasks and ways of thinking that artists can bring to the table. In many cases, it's considered that art is this aloof, abstract thing that is often unemployed by choice, in many cases, like the starving artist image. However, nowadays, it's becoming more and more common that we do need those skills because engineers are struggling, because the work is no longer mathematical problem that needs solving. In some cases it is, but once in a while they will be asked into a sales meeting and struggle because I'm an engineer, I don't do sales, why am I here? How do I convince this person to buy my product because my Excel sheet is not really sexy right now, so what am I supposed to do? They don't want to buy that. So we need artists to make things sellable in a way, to make ideas come to life. And in traditional problem solving, it's usually asked, what is broken and how can we fix it efficiently? But employment today, that's why we're in this situation right now, because you can't solve it with that way of thinking. It doesn't just go to people with knowledge as it used to. Your CV doesn't really matter anymore because there are 1,000 other people with the same amount of skill, and with the same diploma. So how are you going to stand out instead of them? How are you going to get the job instead of them? Funding doesn't go to ideas sitting in notebooks either. Impact does not come only from thinking, but it needs visible action. So thinking about something that you complain about regularly, just have a little thought experiment. Maybe it's student life, if we have students here. Maybe it's mental health. Maybe it's how difficult it feels to enter the job market. And I'm talking about work because it's springtime, and that's what everybody is on about right now, the employment. How do we get jobs? Artists have been chronically suffering from unemployment, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. But thinking about something that you like to complain about, and imagine treating that frustration as an opportunity instead of a complaint. I'm from the Balkans. We love to complain. We complain a lot. We complain passionately. We complain all the time. But we also have a thing called the nevola. If you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. So how do we combine these things? We passionately complain about the problem while we're passionately working on a solution, so that we can get out of that situation and we can complain about the next thing. Very fitting right now. Fully embodied in the Body Entrepreneurship Society community. We recognize problems, and through brainstorming solutions, uplifting each other through learning, thinking outside the box and learning collaboration, we try to solve them. How is that in practice? Well, jobs are a problem. Can you host a conversation? Can you do an impromptu event like this one? Can you do a stream? Maybe build a rough digital version of something that you feel like needs solving. If you have the skills. If you don't, ChatGPT can probably help you. Can you gather 3 people and test an idea? Have a dialogue? People don't talk to each other as much anymore, but it's a good idea to start. Small action can become many things at once. It's a project. It's a portfolio piece. You can share it in the interviews, and it can become a case for funding. Even if it fails, that's okay. You have demonstrated initiative, and initiative is employable. Initiative can be purchased. We think of employment as something that we have to apply for. We think of funding as something we have to apply for all the time. Artists need money to continue doing what they do well, right? They do art. But art can also have an impact, and it must have an impact, in my opinion. Increasingly, employment is something that we try to design more than we apply for. Because when you solve a visible problem, you have created value. Not because you waited, but because you acted, you did something about it. There is a saying how 90,000 Finns do good work, then sit in the corner quiet and don't talk about it. They wait for the good results to actually speak for themselves. Then come in 10,000 Swedish people. Then they talk really loudly about the work that they do. And guess what actually gets noticed? It's not the silent work, because that's just what it is. It's silent. So this is a draft, but it exists. It's something that you can showcase, you can talk about. Impact can be powerful. And perfection waits, always. And Finland is a society of perfectionists. I am very sorry, but you guys have a problem with that. You really need to let go a little bit, because momentum is really what attracts. It's not perfectionism. And in lean design, there is a practice of fail fast, and fail again. So I'll leave you with that. If you want employment, if you want funding, solve something, test something. If you want impact, share something. Don't wait to be hired. Don't wait for someone big to purchase that one ticket, one big piece of art. Do something in the meantime. They might still come, but in the future of work, it's the people who act, even if it's imperfect, but they are the ones who create their own opportunities. So thank you.